Hello, hello. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome to our show.
Yes, we have a good one today. This is a great one. Did you know, Clifton, 85% of the people with learning disabilities have dyslexia, and it affects 15 to 17% of our whole population.
That is a startling statistic, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because today we have with us one of the most prolific television writers, producers ever, Stephen J. Cannell, creator of over 38 television series, of which he has written more than 350 episodes himself, and executive produced over 1,500. He also has 2 feature films in development and 3 national best-selling novels, and another one on the way.
Take a breath and say Superman.
Well, he is kind of that.
But what is surprising is that this Emmy award-winning writer flunked out of 2 different schools and graduated from high school by the skin of his teeth, ironically due to a learning disability.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephen J. Cannell.
Yes.
We really appreciate you coming to share with us, being on the show today. Well, you have become famous, having written and produced such series as Beretta, The Rockford Files, Silk Stockings, on, and 2, 3 novels, and all of this while you have dyslexia. How can that be? How are you able to be this prolific a writer with a learning disability?
Well, I think the easiest way to sort of explain it is that people believe that it has to do with stuff that's coming out of your brain and down onto the page. But in fact, it's really more about what you're uploading than what you're downloading. So the thoughts that I have in my head, I own. And as I can speak a sentence and to you, think it up and communicate with you, so can I think it up and put it down on a piece of paper.
Well, you mentioned uploading. That's where the confusion sometimes comes. What did you mean by that?
Well, just the things that I'm taking into my head when I'm reading things. You know, when I'm not often getting the right information. I eventually do, because I'm smart enough to realize this makes no sense, and I go back and read it again. And one of the kind of insidious things about this condition is that, you know, you might read the thing incorrectly, and then the second time you read it, you get it right.
You were how old when you figured out that you had this? You had gone all the way through elementary, grade school, all the way through high school?
That's right. I'd flunked 3 times.
3?
And gone back with the younger kids. I made one of those up. One of the good things about flunking 3 times is you have your driver's license in the 6th grade. You're the most popular kid.
Most popular
boy in school.
But everything else about it was bad.
And then when you got to college, I read that you would go to the teacher, you would stand in line and register for tons and tons of classes, and then you'd go to the class, and what was it that you asked the teacher?
At the end of the first day of class, they usually had office hours, or they would ask questions, or they say, I'll meet any student after the class if you have questions about the course, and I would seek out that teacher and I'd say, what is your policy on misspellings? And if the answer was 3 misspellings is a flunk, then I dropped the course. But if the teacher said, you know what, this is a history class, so I'm not worried about your, just make it so I can read it, then I would hold the course.
And that's how you got through college.
Well, it was one of the ways.
One of the ways.
Cheating helped.
A little bribery.
We're not believing that. I mean, because just seeing the vast array of ideas and concepts and thoughts and visions that comes out of your writing and producing just tells us this is a very intelligent,
creative.
Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with my brain. So as a matter of fact, I sort of credit this condition with my success, because I think very abstractly. I learned very early on that I could hide out in my imagination. And I did. I daydreamed a lot. I was very good at having a fantasy life in my head. I was also a good football player, which in high school was really helpful, because it kept me, feeling good about myself. And and I think if I hadn't had that, I would have maybe gotten really down on myself. But I was good enough so I could read my name in the newspaper, and it made me feel like, hey, I've got this. But I used to lay in bed and think, what am I going to do when I can't do this anymore? Because I'm not going to be able to make a career out of football, and I know I'm stupid.
Did you always want to write, and what was the first breakthrough that came for you as a writer?
I always like to mention my college writing instructor, Ralph Salisbury. Ralph Salisbury, you know, was the person I think that I can say made the biggest contribution to my life in my growing up years educationally, because he was the most nurturing, friendly instructor I'd ever had. He was the first person who ever looked at me, who was an instructor of mine, and said, you know, you have something. You have a gift. Nobody had ever said that to me before. I'd always been told I wasn't good enough to go on to the next class, that I wasn't applying myself, because that's the curse that most dyslexic children hear all the time, is that because we tend not to appear to be stupid because we're verbal and we can communicate. So our teachers say to us, well, you're not applying yourself.
Right.
And I heard that all the time. This guy would listen to my ideas and read my work and say, you know what, this is really worth it. He would send things out under his letterhead to try and get them published for me.
Wow.
That, you know.
Wow.
That's the kind of support all students need. We'll be back to talk more about the discovery of this dyslexia and how you've overcome it in your work today. And we've got Stephen J. Cannell, and we're thrilled about it, and so should you be. We'll be right back.
Give your children a brighter future. Watch Hello Channel.
So we're talking with Stephen J. Cannell. Stephen, you're 35 years old. You are a head writer, creator, producer on the Rockford Files, and you discover you have dyslexia. How did it affect you?
Well, the way I discovered it was kind of interesting too, because as you may or may not know, this is a kind of a genetic condition. It does run in families. You know, I have passed this condition on to 3 of my 4 children. And I had my oldest daughter was in the 5th grade, I think, and she was being thrown out of the same private school that had thrown me out, and they were basically sort of saying to me that she didn't have the mental capacity to keep up, which was, you know, they were talking about her native intelligence, and I knew she was really smart, so I took her to the Frostic Institute and got her tested, and at the same time, she had all the same conditions that I had suffered with. So I thought, I'm going to find out, you know, now dyslexia was in my vocabulary, and I thought, I'm going to see if I'm dyslexic. So I took the test with her, and it turned out we both were, and surprisingly, she was much smarter than I was, you know, in terms of basic IQ, you know, and I took that IQ test back and threw it on this guy's desk at this private school and challenged him to get as good a score, you know, and they allowed her to stay for to complete the year. They were going to throw out at midterm, but that's how I found out.
Was it an aha moment for you?
You know what? It was more of a kind of, oh, so that's what that was. You know, I'm not somebody that spends a lot of time grinding stuff up, you know. I mean, if I have a bad patch, you know, I try and think through it and say, what did I do wrong here? Can I learn from this? And I move on from it. You know, I don't let it haunt me forever.
So you had always known you had a problem. This just finally gave a name to it.
Right.
And once you got a name for it, was there anything new now that that you knew you could do, or was there anything you were advised to do? I mean, obviously you're already so incredibly successful, but was there something now that you could apply to your life? Not
really. I think one of the things that we learn about it is that it is a condition, like having blue eyes. I mean, it's the way my brain functions. I think it's an advantage, not a disadvantage, because I think it allows me to use abstract thought in a way that most people can't. I believe that the stories that I tell and the imagination that I live with every day is the gift that this condition gives to me.
Right.
Did you wish that perhaps you had learned about it earlier? Do you think it could have helped you to maybe achieve some of your goals a little more quickly?
No, because I think had I known earlier, I might have cut myself a lot of slack. I might have said, you know, and I can't do any better because I got this problem. You know, what I was forced to do was to constantly be competing, constantly failing. I got very good at failure, by the way, and what I found out was how to deal with that. And the way I chose to deal with it is not to think about it. When I would get bad grades or flunk and have to go back with the other kids, I mean, I certainly had to live that. I had to go be with the younger kids, which was always a problem for me, and I always felt until I got to know them and they became my friends. But I would in the summer before I knew I was going back to join those younger kids, and I would think about it. I would go, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm just not going to think about it. And I was able to screen it off.
This fascinates me just simply because I do believe people are successful based on how they deal with failure, not how they deal with success. But how as a kid, because with dyslexia, so many kids, the problem is they become failures.
You know what? I'm an upbeat person. You know, I'm not a negative person. I've always looked. I'm an optimist, not a pessimist. Despite this, I always see opportunity and not, you know, problems. And I always look for, when I fail, even back then I can remember going, you know what? I'm going to turn this around.
I'm really excited to hear how you got into writing. How did you break into that in the professional business?
Well, in my high school yearbook, under ambition, this kid who flunked every English course he ever took had written down author.
Wow.
Yes.
And
Somehow
so
you knew.
I just always wanted to write. You know. A really interesting thing.
Yeah.
I wrote a poem once about the assassination of Kennedy, and I got a B- on this poem, but it was really a good poem. I just found it recently, and I had given it to my sister, who was in another school, but actually a little bit tougher school, and a year ahead of me, and she handed it in her class and got an A. And I think this is really interesting. I got a B- for the same poem that she got an A for, and I wrote it. And why? Because the perception of me
That's correct.
was that I was not a good student.
Good student.
I've got to tell you this, and maybe I shouldn't go there, but that's a problem that African Americans sometimes have in school. I wrote papers for some of my peers, and they got A's on the same paper that I got a B.
Yeah, I'm sure that's absolutely the case, because there is a cultural bias.
Yeah.
And there's an educational bias, and I think this is really, I mean, it's people. What are you going to do? You know, people are what people are, but you know, it's still you do.
We need to know the first big break, though.
Yeah.
What
When
was
did
the-
you
what
start
was the big
writing
one?
for the studios? And
Well-
and was it a creative thing, or were you just a staff writer with like the Tonight Show or something?
No, I wanted to write any kind of a television show. I actually got very specific about it. I thought, how am I going to make my living as a writer? This was my dream. I would sit down at like 5:30 when I got home, and I would write until 10:30. And Marcia would put dinner on at 10:30. I did that for 6 out of 7 days out of the week. I wrote on Saturday included, and I gave myself Sunday off. I did that for 4 or 5 years without
my.
anybody buying anything. And then eventually, slowly, I got an agent, and then I started to sell. And after the 3 or 4 television scripts that I sold, I was put under contract at Universal, and I was the head writer on a show called Adam 12, which gave me an opportunity not only to write and sell my own stories to myself, which is nirvana for a writer, you know, but I was also rewriting for other people. I was going to dailies. I was seeing how actors performed the lines. If it got too poetic, I was seeing that it didn't work, that there was a line you couldn't cross. I was learning how to write believable dialogue. And then I started to get the opportunities to create shows, and it went on from there.
Well, you know, I'm particularly interested in
incredible.
that because of the creating the show aspect. I've been doing some of that myself lately. We're going to talk a lot more about that with Stephen J. Cannell, and we'll be right back with the Executive Director of the International Dyslexia Association, J. Thomas Vial.
Hello, my name is Javier. I'm from Spain. I learned English. So can you. Watch Hello Channel.
Joining us now is someone who can speak on how dyslexia affects people in school and in the workplace. Please welcome J. Thomas Vial, Executive Director of the International Dyslexia Association.
Thank you.
Tom, I want to ask you, is a dyslexic, is that the way one says it?
We prefer individual with dyslexia. Put the focus on the individual, not the disability.
Okay.
Don't label them.
I think that's good.
Okay.
Is an individual with dyslexia at a disadvantage in school or in the workplace?
Oh, clearly. Reading skill, which is the primary deficit in dyslexia, is probably the most significant determinant of success in school. You get into the workplace, and as our economy has shifted from a manufacturing economy into an information processing economy, this condition really manifests itself in a negative way for an awful lot of folks.
What can we as a society do legislatively to help these students and people?
Well, we do have good laws on the books in terms of IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That calls for a free and appropriate education for all individuals with disabilities. So the first thing a parent should do is really educate themselves to their rights within the school system so that they can make certain that their child is getting the kind of education that they need in order to succeed. I'd like to go back, though, and talk about how dyslexia, from a legal standpoint, has to be defined as a disability.
Yeah.
But we also like to think of it as a learning difference. Clearly, in Stephen's case and many others, he didn't learn in the traditional manner, but he certainly did learn. So when you link that with the whole question of self-esteem, talking about it as a learning difference as opposed to a disability, I think is critically important for the child.
Is there something early going on? Because from what I understand, if this is not diagnosed by what, 9 years old or something, you've got a problem?
Well, we have pretty good neurobiological evidence right now that during fetal development, something happens to the brain structure. The area of the brain that is charged with the responsibility of decoding the written word doesn't work real well, plain and simple. Doesn't mean that other parts of the brain don't work very well. A frightening statistic, as far as I'm concerned, out of the National Institutes of Health indicate that if a child leaves third grade not reading at grade level, that child has a 1 in 7 chance of ever reading at grade level.
I'd like to add something here, too. I don't know that it's the school that we should put this on. You talk about schools, they've got lots of kids there, they've got time management problems. It's the parents that have to be alert to this. You have to look at your child. If your child, as Tom just said, is not reading at grade level in the third grade, you got a problem. And you've got to go get that child tested. Any pediatrician can hook you up with the correct testing facilities and go down. It's not a difficult test. It's not a hard one to, for the child to take. Once you have this, there are, as Tom says, laws now that are on the books that will force the schools to give you more time, to treat you in a different fashion, which will allow you to compensate for your learning disabilities.
And the parent, getting back to a point Stephen made earlier, really needs to be the child's first advocate. Read to your child early. You're going to see signs in your child. If your child doesn't understand rhyming, play rhyming games with your children. That will help very much give you an awareness of whether or not the child is picking up on different sounds of letters. So reading early is one of the best things a parent can do with their children.
Now, in a lot of this material that I read, it seemed to want to say dyslexia is not this, it is not this, it is not, I mean, there would be whole paragraphs of what it was not. And tell me the what it's not, and then why it's so important to know the what it is.
Well, there's some history to that, which I won't go through all of it. But the important thing to recognize is that it's brain-based, it's biological in nature. And that's been very important because historically there was this sense that, well, the child's just lazy, maybe she's dumb, she's stupid. We know that it's not that. We know that it's not that the child's lazy. You heard Stephen talk about the number of hours he would write in an evening. That's not atypical of the successful dyslexic student, putting in 5 hours of homework when for the non-dyslexic individual, maybe it's an hour of homework. So
I have to go to a break, but I'd like to pick up on that point when we come back. And we'll learn how to maximize your child's or your own potential when we return.
Hello. That's right, I said hello. I'm talking about an exciting new television channel that will change your life. My name is Ruth, and I want you to be one of the first to know about Hello Channel. Hello Channel is designed to teach you to speak English. Anyone can learn. We offer something for everyone. You'll see programming for children, teenagers, and adults, all on different levels. With Hello Channel, you'll hear, see, read, and speak English as you're watching entertaining television programs, making it easy to learn. If you've always wanted to learn English but haven't had a chance, Hello Channel is perfect for you. Start today, and remember, for a brighter future, just say hello. This is Hello Channel.
And welcome back. We're here with Stephen J. Cannell and Thomas Vial talking about dyslexia. Tom, what are some of the things that we can do to help children become more aware?
Again, thinking of this as a learning difference. We try to use different pathways in the brain, using multisensory techniques of teaching. A lot of times teachers will ask a child to be tracing a letter on a piece of felt or a piece of sandpaper to maximize that sensory input to connect the shape of the letter with a particular sound. We know also that individuals with dyslexia tend to do best under very structured environments. If your child is having difficulties in school, first of all, get him or her tested. Have a structured environment. Try to set a certain time of the day in which the homework will be done, and work with that child to help them succeed in that structured environment.
Stephen, when you're on a book tour, as you probably are now with this one, when you're touring, you talk about dyslexia, don't you?
Very often I do, and I want to add one thing to what Tom just said because I think it's really important, and that's that as a parent, you must, with a dyslexic child, you must create victories for your children. And those victories can occur anywhere. They can occur, you know, in sports, they can occur in artistic endeavors, plays, whatever you feel your child has a aptitude for, push them in that direction and then applaud like crazy, because what is really important is that these children don't lose their self-confidence, don't lose the essence of trying, don't become defeatist. Once that child quits on himself or herself, you've got a major problem.
Yes.
Well, we're going to applaud Stephen J. Cannell.
We are. It's fabulous.
His victories. Actually, all of the techniques that we've learned about today would even help children without learning disabilities. Read it, write it, say it, hear it, do it. We want to say thank you to both of you gentlemen for being a part of our show today. Tom, you've got a website.
www.interdys.org. Go there, you can get a lot of information.
That's right. And we'd be happy to link up with you on our website, www.lifestyle.org, and you can get all the information there. Well, Tammy,
Yes.
we're out of
Great show.
time.
We're out.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Lifestyle Magazine.